What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Something came in the mail today. Powertronics Piggyback ECU for the Duke 390, as you can see right there. What I want to do in this video is kind of go over briefly about the install. When I tried to look up a lot of videos for it, there was nothing really on YouTube, at least in English, and a lot of the stuff that was not in English, they didn't really get good angles or explain really anything. So I'm going to try to remedy that and make a video while I install it for you guys. Alright, so I figured I'd just take a moment to kind of go over the contents of the box real quick. So right here you have your Powertronics ECU module. On the back there's a little plug that covers up the serial port so that if you go to a dyno and get a dyno tune, they can plug into it right there. Let me set this down. Underneath that is a quick start guide. And then underneath your quick start guide is a USB cable for when you do go get the dyno tune. And then right here, this is the stock map module. So whenever you want to run the bike factory, you can also use this to verify your install. So it'll give you LED status that you've done a proper install and your harness is good to go. So I'll probably do that at the end of mine. Plug this in real quick, just make sure everything is plugged into each harness adapter correctly, and then we'll take that off and put the actual module on. So over here on the other side of the box, right here on top, we have the map selector switch for map 1 and map 2 that come on the ECU from the factory. There's like a race version and a race plus version. Right now, Powertronics is running a special where they give you one of these for free if you order an ECU. So that came free with mine, so I'll probably mount that up on my handlebar during this installation as well. If it seems like it's going to be a pain in the ass, I might just skip it for now. But there's that. And then this is how to hook up the map switch paperwork. Right here we have the main harness. And we'll go over this more as the video progresses, but it tells you where to hook each one of these into. Underneath that, we got some extra goodies, it looks like. A whole little packet. Well, it looks like a couple different keychains. There's a black and yellow keychain, and there's like a clear Race Dynamics keychain. And then we have a couple Powertronics stickers. A couple smaller ones, and then some Race Dynamics stickers as well. There's a couple zip ties in here. And then what I'm assuming is the full manual for installation. So I'm going to go through this manual real quick and just get us started. So the first step here, it says, is to remove the seat. I've already done that. If you don't know how to remove your seat, all you have to do is put your key into this lock right here, turn it, pull up on the rearmost part of your rear seat so that it comes out of that lock right there. And then you're going to pull it outwards, like kind of backwards, to get that back seat off. After that, you just lift off the back part of your front seat and then pull it backwards up and out. All it is sitting in these little tabs right here. After that, it says that it wants us to remove the tank fairings. I haven't removed the tank fairings yet, so I'm going to look up a little bit of directions about that, and then I'll guide you guys through it. Alright, so from my understanding, to remove the tank fairings here, all we have to do is take off these two bolts right here. There's one located right here, and then there are two in the front. They're all fairly easy access, one right here and one right here. The innermost one that's in here, as far as I know, you don't have to be involved with unless you're taking the black inner shroud here off. But for right now, the directions, as far as I can tell, only go as far as taking this outer portion off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my Allen key that fits all 4 of these bolts, well, 5 of these bolts, and then I'm going to take it off, and then I'll be back. Alright, so I got all 5 bolts out. Something I just want to note for you guys real quick. The ones that, pretty much all the bolts that aren't this one that's up here on the top, are the same size. So these 3, technically those 4, are the same size. The longest one, right there, is the only one that belongs up there. So just keep that in mind and make sure you put these somewhere safe that you're not going to lose them. Alright, so I might not be able to film this because I have to slide the fairing off now, and I don't know if it's going to take both hands. But to get this off, what you need to do is you need to grab it from like here and maybe down here. And it slides this way. So you kind of have to slide it off these tabs and then pull it off. You can't just take it straight off. You have to slide it. So let me see if it'll slide with just one hand. I don't think it will. It's a little tight, so yeah. I'm gonna have to put the camera down and then I'll show you guys the tabs. Quick note before I slide this, these things right here are little rubber grommets that are stuck into the panel behind them. So make sure before you start sliding that you pull these out and away. And I'm just gonna make sure there's no other ones. Doesn't seem like it. Seems like everything is free now, so I should be able to slide this backwards. It's still gonna require me to use two hands. All right, so that actually came off a lot easier once I used two hands. Just to show you guys real quick, here on the back, this is where it slides in. This tab right here, see that? How it kind of slides in there. So what you're sliding it off of is this rubber piece right here and this rubber piece right here. That's why you have to slide the panel kind of backwards before it'll pop off. So now that we've got that done, I'm gonna read the directions again and we'll move on to the next step. I'm pretty sure what's happening is we're gonna take this bolt out for the rear part of the tank just so we can lift the tank slightly and slide the harness back behind here. I'm just assuming right now, but I'm pretty sure that's what we're gonna do. Don't forget to go ahead and take the side fairing off the other side too, because the throttle position sensor is on the right hand side of the bike, so you're gonna have to route one piece of the harness to that side. The rest of it is gonna go along this left side to back here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my other side panel off too before we continue. All right, so next step in the directions for the Duke, there's another one down here for the RC, is to locate the 6-pin CKP connector and remove the screws to access the ignition coil and injectors. So what it's talking about is, I probably can't see it because this thing's in the way. There's a 6-pin connector right there, it's white. What we need to do is take these Allen bolts off now. We're gonna remove this panel, and behind there is gonna be our ignition coil. We're gonna kind of detach it, get things out of the way, and that'll give us a little more hand room to get in here so we can do our spark ignition coil part of the harness, our injector, and also I believe throttle position sensors on the other side. I think it's the crank sensor that's on this side. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna take this panel off. It's just these two bolts, pull them out. Keep in mind that behind here is a ground wire that needs to get bolted back into place when you put this back together. All right, so I got the bolts removed. I'm gonna remove this plate and you guys are gonna see what I'm talking about here. So put that down. Here's that ground connection wire that I was talking about. Just make sure that you put this exactly back where it was when you go to put this back together. So this right here is our ignition coil. We're just gonna pull this out and kind of move it to the side a little bit. Might even just disconnect it to get it more out of the way, because that 6-pin connector that we need to get to is right here. Looks like the release for it is right there, so I need to get to that. And then just to give you guys a little view right quick, back here. It's hard to get it to focus. Right here where my finger is, that's the injector harness plug that we're also going to tap into. Just to give you guys an idea of what we're looking at. And then let's go back to the directions and continue from there. So it says connect to the ground terminal to the negative side of the battery. Yeah, when we lay our harness out, we'll do that. Step 3, locate and connect the CKP, the TPS Powertronic wiring harness, mating connectors on the stock wiring harness. Locate and connect the injector connector and the ignition connectors of the Powertronic wiring harness to the mating connectors on the stock wiring harness. So basically it's just telling you to go through and connect all your wiring up. Now, it should be fairly easy to find all of these connectors, because you're going to have a corresponding connector on the Powertronics harness that matches up to a connector that's in here. So you can see how this gray connector right here is gray, just like the one in there for the injector. This is the one for the injector that's going to run in line with it. So let me get this cut open and start laying the harness out. All right, so I've got the harness just kind of loosely laid in here. This back clip that goes into the actual Powertronics unit is going to be in here, because that's where I'm going to put the Powertronics unit at. This right here is your map switching harness. It comes with this little bypass kind of thing on it that you unplug and plug in if you want to run map 1 or map 2. We're going to replace this with that switch that they sent us. Right here is the ground cable. It's like a super long ground cable. I'm assuming they try to make this work for both bikes. But that's going to go here on the battery. And then coming around here, I've got the TPS on the right hand side of the bike for the throttle position sensor. And then I've got the rest of everything else branching off over to the left side here, because that's our CKP. Right here is the spark for the ignition coil. And then right here we have the injector. Only have one injector, so this is for the injector. And this one right here is actually for your quick shifter. So it says 2QS sensor. That we're going to leave back behind and kind of just tuck up and away because we don't have the quick shifter yet. We'll probably get that in the future, and then we'll route that down here and connect up to the quick shifter once I decide to go that route. Now, one thing I want to go over real quick. The instructions in the box don't go over this, but when you look up the instructions online off of the Powertronics website, it mentions pulling back on these right here. And if you look under here, I'll try to get a hold of this thing. Pull up kind of gently on this thing. I just did it, and now it doesn't want to get out of the way. It's like it's scared now that I know. The instructions online mention bending this back a little bit, and then you can stick an Allen key in here, and it takes out this little bolt right here, and then you can take this bracket out, and you can actually tuck your wiring down there. So I'm probably going to go ahead and do that. So behind these little plastic pieces right here, little Allen heads, I'm going to screw those out. I'm going to take this bracket out so I can route my wiring a little more neat. All right, so I got those bolts out. Not really all that hard to do. Now this bracket is free, except for the fact that there's a zip tie right here. I'm gonna cut it. It doesn't seem like it's doing anything like super important. I've got a zip tie to replace it if I want. So let's get that cut out, and then we'll get that bracket out of there. All right, so I went ahead and I did the throttle position sensor first, the one labeled TPS, because it is the biggest pain in the ass plug to get to. It's not that bad once you figure it out. You need to use the harness as a clue of how this thing comes apart. So the original one is right here. Okay, it looks just like this. I know this is the one coming off the harness, but they look exactly the same. In order to get it off, you need to reach your finger back here, and you need to push towards yourself to release the lock. Then you need to take a flathead screwdriver in through this port right here and push it backwards, and it should slide out pretty easy. Once I figured that out, super easy to get out, but you cannot do it with your hands alone. You got to use one finger to come up in behind here, pull towards you to release that locking tab on the very edge, and then use a flathead screwdriver to push it back. I'm telling you right now, it's not in the instructions really to do it that way, but that is the easiest way. Then all you do is you plug your harness in line and kind of get everything in here how you would like it. I'm going to probably use one black zip tie right here just to hold this in place. And then what I did is my returning lines are just coming up here behind the little slide tab for the seat. And then I'm just kind of tucking them back here as close to the frame and the tank as I could. And then this one you don't have to even lift up the tank for. You just kind of shove everything up through this little slot. And then up behind here, the mounting hole for the tank. And then it'll come back to the rest of the harness and follow its way up to the ECU. I just had the ECU mocked in place to make sure I had it in a comfortable position to fit it. But that's the TPS sensor knocked out. So I'm going to go to the other side bike and accomplish the rest of this. Quick note before I do that, I got the ground wired in as well. What I did was I put it in and then I used a small black zip tie. Something you guys need to note right now is I would have extra zip ties handy because there was only like 4 that comes in the kit. Fortunately, I had some from a previous project on hand, so I've been using them for little things like this, and like what I'm going to do down here, and I'll use the big ones in areas where I feel they're a little more required. So I bunched up the excess of the ground cable and just kind of shoved it into this little slot right here, and it connects to the battery right there. So let me get to the other side of the bike and continue getting this harness put in. So just to better explain what I was talking about on the other side of the bike, that you can plug the Powertronics harness into its own end to figure out how to take these things apart when they're in here. Because as you can see, this connector that I need to get to right here, it's a little vague on how I need and what I need to do to get it off. So what I did was I plugged these two together. Now I can look at the end that matches up with the end that I need to get to take it off. And what I figured out is that the locking connector needs to be pried outwards like this, and then you have to pull the connector apart. So my little flathead is going to have to find its way up through the bottom of that to pry that apart, and then I'm going to have to wiggle this and pop that out, and then plug this one in line with it. So pro tip, this is what happens when you speak too early. There's a red zip tie that's going around this part of the frame right here that's holding this down. Just go ahead and cut it and use one of your extra zip ties to put it back in place, because it's damn near impossible to get a flathead vertically up in there enough to get this thing unlocked and get a good grip on it. So now I have easy access to its locking tab right here, and I can plug everything back together, and then I'll use one of my little extra zip ties and I'll zip tie it back into place where it was. All right, so I'm just holding the ignition wires out of the way so you can see this. So as you can see here, I just used another black zip tie to kind of put this back in place. The factory harness is right here. So this is the factory plug that I undid, and this is the ECU side of it. So this actually stays nice and up out of the way by itself. The only part that I zip tied was just this one right here, that's returning to the other side of the harness, and it keeps them nice and close together. A neat install. I'm pretty OCD when it comes to things like this. So this is the CPK plug knocked out. Pretty easy once you cut that original zip tie off of there, and then just zip tie it back into place. Keep in mind there's these little holes that you have to route that zip tie through, and then I would make sure, because these are kind of tucked back there, I would make sure these are out for now, because you can use a different zip tie on those if you need to, but leave them loose for now, because this is going to go into our spark side of the harness right here, and then back into the coil, and then we have to mount the coil back up. So that's what, actually I'm not going to knock that one out next. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to do the injector harness, which I have it shoved back in there already. Right now I just need to take off the stock injector plug right there and put those in line. That should be pretty straightforward. Probably won't have to use any zip ties on that one. Up here, I'm trying to keep these kind of tucked behind the gas tank. What I think I'm gonna do is, because you can't clear this little thing right here, is I'm gonna take that bolt out from the gas tank. I'm gonna see how much clearance that gives me to lift this up, and then I'm just gonna shove the wires back up under there real quick, and that'll give me a nice tidy install too, because I'm not sure if the panel, I'm sure the panel will go back on, but I don't want to put any extra pressure on it. Plus I don't want the panel to pinch on these wires or the seat or anything like that. So probably when I'm done plugging the rest of these in, I'll take that bolt out and see if it gives me enough leverage to pop this up a little bit. All right, let's get the light on so I can hopefully show you guys this better. So the injector plug is done. There's the gray injector plug. This is the one that's coming off the new ECU harness. As you can, if you kind of follow that back, you can see it right there. This is the OEM one. This is the OEM side of it running back to the factory ECU right here. And then this is the male connector end that comes off the new ECU. What I did was I used this little hole in the bracket of this frame right here to hold the factory plug in place, because otherwise it would just be back here above the cylinder head, or the valve cover actually, just kind of jiggling and jumping around. So like I said, I like a neat install, so I just zip tied that to that right there. All that leaves me with now is my coil pack wire, which you take out of this end of that coil pack that we took off. So here's the factory plug. The ones for my ECU harness are right here. You got plenty of room on these, like more room than you'd really need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these plugged in line, and then I'll figure out how I want to zip tie these if I need to. Probably push them like kind of back like that, zip tie it probably to somewhere in here, and then put the coil pack back in place. Once we've done that, everything's lined up. Just real quick, the quick shifter line that comes off of here, I just kind of wrapped it around and shoved it down into this little crevice right here because we're not going to be using that for now, so it's out of the way. And like I said, I'm still going to go back and see if I can, you know, take this bolt off, lift this tank up just enough to shove this pieces of the wiring harness up under the tank back in there, and then they'll just run neatly down here, and this all should be covered up by the seat and then the factory fairing. That's going to go back on right there. So that's our last plug to do right there, and then we're pretty much done. After that, I'll do an idle relearn, start the bike up, probably run it with the, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the bike up with the that little factory plug that goes there that I showed you guys earlier. This thing right here, just to make sure everything's running properly. Then I'll take this out, put the Powertronics unit back in, and do the idle relearn. And then after the idle relearn is done, I'll shut the bike off, let it rest for a little bit, and then we'll go take it on a test drive, and I'll give you guys my thoughts. All right, guys, so I just wrapped up that last plug for the ignition spark. Everything is back here all nice and tidy. What I did for the excess of the spark cable is I just pulled it taut through here and kind of pushed it up, and it's just kind of resting on these rubber hoses right here. It should be enough friction to keep them in place. The rest of them are coming from underneath the tank, which I want to confirm with you guys. If you remove the one bolt right here, it's 12 millimeter, it gives you enough leverage that you can push up on the back of the tank, and you'll have plenty of clearance to push all these wires from the wiring harness up underneath here. And then that way you've got it nice and neat. Nothing's going to get in the way of your fairings or your seat when you're taking them on and off. For the other side, for the throttle position sensor, I just pushed the one single cable kind of down this little crevice right there, and then it's coming down along underneath the tank, which you don't need to lift the tank up to do, as you saw earlier, but there it is right there. I might use a zip tie up against the frame right here to keep it in place. But other than that, that pretty much wraps up the install. I would have liked for this to have enough slack, which I'm sure if I redo this up here, I'll have enough slack on the rest of this that I can get it down into this crevice right here along the side of the airbox and then up and around. So I'm going to mess with that a little bit, and then I'll see you guys in a minute. Alright guys, so it's completely installed. I haven't started the bike or anything yet, but I got that cross bracket back in place. There was enough slack in the harness that I created to get it to kind of wrap underneath here a little bit. There's enough slack that I can pull back on it. Get to the airbox lid screw there, still take the airbox lid out. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this install. It took me, I mean, if I wasn't sitting here filming, it probably would have took me maybe an hour most, just because of how neat I'm trying to be. So as you can see, nice and neat install, comes up and under there. And then, I'm not sure, I gotta put the fairings on, and I'll let you guys see it, if they're gonna show there or not. Maybe a little bit, but nothing drastic. I mean, it's a naked bike, so who really cares? But yeah, let me go ahead and get the fairings back on, and then I'm gonna start it up with that factory ECU connector real quick, just to make sure everything's working. Wait a minute. I feel like there's something we're forgetting. And I bet you guys were probably about to yell at me about this too. But I did forget. And I just realized that I forgot. So, we forgot to put in that map switch they sent us. So I went ahead and I did it. It's pretty straightforward. It was easy to do. Here's a little connector that came on the harness from the get-go. I took it off. It's just a twist tie. That was twist tied to the other side of it right here. I took it off because you don't really need it if you're going to be running that switch. So I'll put that down. Now here's how I routed mine. I decided to mount it here. Map 1, map 2, so on and so forth. The cable runs directly behind it right there. There's enough clearance. And then it's running right here next to the brake line. And then it's coming down here behind my little mount for the windshield. And then behind there, it's pretty much just following the clutch cable line now. So here it is. I put a zip tie right here to hold it a little bit. Now, when you place any of your zip ties on this, you're going to want your handlebar, if this is mounted on the right side of your handlebar, you're going to want to have your handlebars in the full left locked position, because that's what makes the most tension on this line. Because if I move it towards myself, it gets slack. So you're going to want to have it fully locked this way before you place any of these zip ties. And then what I did was I traced the cord up along this side right here. And I just kept, you know, shoving it up under the right side of the bike in the fairing here. So it's actually pushed right here behind the coolant reservoir. Friction's holding that up there. Second zip tie I placed is right here. And the reason I did that was because after I had routed it along here, and you don't even need the fairing back off to do this, but I just shoved it up underneath the fairing, up under here, up and around here, and then I put it underneath where we shoved the big harness down, and then it goes back under this plate, which I had to take back off, and then up and around. So the reason for this zip tie right here is because whenever I pull the handlebar back to the right towards me, this area of cable then gets slacked, and it had so much slack that the cable would come down and it'd be showing, and then when you went back the other direction, it would zip back up, right? So in order to get rid of that, what I did was I put the handlebar back at full F lock, and then I used 2 of the zip ties connected to each other and zip tied it fairly tightly, but not too tight, because what this does is, you know, when you have that handlebar in the full left lock position, all that tension should be coming back this way towards the handlebar. So to prevent that slack from coming back down this way and making it hang down, I zip tied it really tight right here. But I left this one just a little bit loose. So that way all the slack in that line has room to move. And I can go full left and full right lock, and there's no binding, no issues whatsoever. So that's pretty much how you map the little map switch there, which we'll get to try out later. So that's all buttoned up, and like I said, I routed it up and around here, shoved it underneath the big cable that we had previously pushed down in here, which I'm gonna have to shove back in there again, but and then it goes underneath here, up, it's looping around, and then into the ECU so we can switch our maps on the fly. So let me go ahead and get that stock connector placed, and then I'm gonna fire up the bike and make sure everything's working. All right, so let's go ahead and try to fire it up. Fuel pump primed, that's a good sign. Let's go back here, we got 2 green lights for injector power and spark power. So let's hit the start button. So you can see they're both firing, the injector and the spark. There's not a light for the CKP or the TPS coming on, but oh, there it goes. Come on, the throttle. Actually smell like a little bit of fuel. I think that's from the enriching of this, the unit itself. Even this stock one, I think it runs a little more rich than your stock ECU would. going to kill the bike now and unplug the battery for a good little bit so I can do the idle reset with the Powertronics ECU plugged in. Alright, so the idle relearn should be complete, and now I'm going to go gear up and get ready to take it out on a ride. Alright, I just got back from the test drive, and I can say for a fact that it's 110% worth it. I started off in map 1, and immediately you could tell the bike was idling smoother. The low throttle response was better. It wasn't surgy at all. I could literally putt at like 3,000, 2,500 RPM, no problem, no jerkiness. All of that was completely remedied and just gone. So I rode it around for about 15 miles on map 1, and I can say that map 1 feels more like they just took the stock map and they just made it better. They smoothed it out. There's a little bit more torque. The top end feels roughly the same, but there's definitely some low end power that's there. So I rode it like that for about 15 miles, and then I decided to flick that switch over to map 2. And map 2 is definitely the power map for sure. I did a U-turn, flipped it into map 2, and I was rolling about 2 miles an hour after my U-turn. I just ripped the throttle like I've done before when it was stock, and the front end just immediately came off the ground. And I don't mean like just a little bit like it normally does. I mean it came like 2 feet up off the ground, and I wheelied for probably a good 30 feet. And then the light in front of me turned red, and I came to a stop. And this lady in the car next to me, she's a young lady about my age. She was just sitting there kind of giggling and laughing when she looked at me, because she definitely saw it in her rearview mirror. Map 2, besides that, is definitely more urgent, and it's urgent all the time. Like, it just wants you to go. The throttle is definitely, the electronic signal, I think, in map 2 is being boosted so that when you do give throttle, it's more throttle per turn, really, than it is stock. There's definitely more top-end grunt. Top-end speed seemed to be relatively close to the same too. I was quicker to get there. I topped out at about 101, 102. Map 2 definitely got to that top speed faster, really smoothly, and everything just felt great. So if you're hesitant about buying this product, I wouldn't be. I would go ahead and do it. Hopefully this install video was helpful to you guys, and in the future I'll make more mod videos. The next thing I plan to do is get the open air lid box mod, to open up the top of the air box with an extra filter element. I heard that adds a little more torque as well, and since I have the ECU done, it's safe for me to do that now without running too lean or anything like that. So with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.